So Ilia Topuria is the new champion of the world, and it's time to do some matchmaking.
That's right.
You know, before we decided to do this video on who his next opponent could potentially be, I wanted to pose a question to our subscribers in the YouTube community post section. And so I put up a couple of options. Who would you like to see Ilia face in his first title defense? I put up Max Holloway, Alexander Volkanovski. Then I did some wild cards, Suga Sean O'Malley, Conor McGregor, and then other. And if it's other, then comment who you think would be the best potential opponent for him.
Right.
And, you know, it was a bit surprising to me because far and away, Max Holloway was the one that got the most votes at just over 40%. And then Volk was at number 2 with almost 30%. So it seems like the people want to see Ilia Topuria defend his title against Max Holloway in his first defense. And I get it. That's a super fun fight, a great stylistic matchup. But I think timing-wise, especially with Max having Justin Gaethje on the docket for a couple of months from now, that's likely going to be a war. I don't know how feasible that's going to be because I don't know how long the UFC is going to want to ice Topuria. So basically, I want to pose you the question of who do you think is the best first opponent? And do you agree with the subscribers that it's likely Blessed Holloway?
Well, I love these polls because it really does give you a chance to take the temperature on the crowd. You know, Everybody knows who they want to see in there. And when you get a new champion in the UFC, it's a lot of fun because it feels like you've got fresh blood and parity in the division, especially one that's been taken over by somebody like Volkanovski for years now. And at first glance, you're like, oh man, there's so many options. There's like, I mean, he's calling out Conor McGregor, who's potentially fighting at 185 in his next fight. And I know he's not going to get that fight anytime soon, if ever. But it's just fun to think about all the potential matchups. But then you do have to get down into the fine print and look at scheduling and look at people's, past fights, what they've got lined up. And then, if they fought previously before, or maybe on his rise to the belt, or if they never fought before. There's all sorts of things that go into it, and timing is really one of the most important aspects of not only MMA fighters' careers, but also the matchmaking.
Yes.
Because you look at the people that you named off, Max Holloway, if he wouldn't have signed that bout with Justin Gaethje for the BMF title, which I'm super glad he did, he would find himself absolutely in the next title fight, and I think it would be sometime around International Fight Week or early summer because Ilia didn't take any damage. But Max Holloway obviously has a great fight, a big, high-profile fight on the horizon with Justin Gaethje, and it actually is for a belt too, and it's an even more rare belt than the UFC championship belt. So I think that Max Holloway's in a great position, and the Ilia Topuria fight's not going to go anywhere. I think win, lose, or draw against Justin Gaethje, Max Holloway is still the number one contender at 145 and has been ever since Volk became the champion. That's one reason I don't see Max Holloway getting the shot, obviously, timing. Ilia is also looking at Conor McGregor. There's 0% chance that he's ever going to get that fight, especially at 145, and probably not even at 155. And then you've got to look at Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez, who are squared up to fight each other. But that's probably going to be a war. They're probably going to take some time to heal up after that because it seems like those two are right on the same level and it's going to be a competitive fight. I would assume they're both going to take meaningful damage and going to have to take some time to heal those wounds. So the list of great potential matchups that you had right when Ilia became the champion and everybody started wondering who's next shrinks up real quickly. And then, of course, you got to take Volk out of the conversation for immediate rematches because he said himself, look, I want to take 6 months. I want to go relax. I want to recover. I want to regain my composure and then come back with a different plan of attack. And everybody has to respect the champ for doing that. So I don't really know which direction we're going to go. It seems like there's way less options than what he laid out on the table and what the poll is offering. But there's always going to be an interesting fight lined up. Movsar is one of the guys that sticks out as somebody that is probably available and healthy and would love to get a shot, and nobody would bat an eye at him and his credentials getting the belt title shot. But at the same time, I don't really know if the UFC sees their bright new star, Ilia Topuria, going in there for his very first title defense against a guy like Movsar, who's still a relative unknown to the casuals and to most people that watch MMA. I think they see a potential megastar in Ilia Topuria, and they want to give him a good fight. I'm not saying he needs tune-ups. This is not boxing. But if they could somehow make the winner of Yair versus Ortega be the first title defense for Ilia, I think that'd be the better move.
I think that's the the direction that they're probably going to go in. And then the other interesting follow-up poll that I did to the poll questioning who everybody wants to see Ilia fight in his first defense was a poll that simply said, if Max Holloway loses to Justin Gaethje at UFC 300, does that sway your opinion in wanting to see Max versus Topuria? Obviously, two different weight class. Totally different situation with the BMF belt on the line as opposed to being a number one contender fighting for the undisputed belt at 45.
Right.
And almost 60% of people that answered that poll said that it does make a difference to them. If Max Holloway loses to Justin Gaethje, that lessens their interest in wanting to see him compete against Ilia Topuria for the undisputed title.
Makes sense.
It does make sense. It makes sense and it doesn't in a lot of ways, because obviously Max Holloway, we've seen him at 55 before, and I think even though he's a tall, long guy, he's a true 45er. His body frame, it makes him more apt to having success at 45. So I think that it's probably likely going to be, as you said, Movsar. He's a candidate, but I think more than likely what the UFC is looking to do is make the winner of T-City versus Yair. And in their best case scenario, that would probably be Yair, because Yair seems to have some heat with Ilia. Don't know if it's real or manufactured. He's talking about Mexico versus Spain. These are two nice-looking Spanish-speaking guys. We know the UFC PI is just being built in Mexico, and the UFC wants to open up the Spanish market by taking a pay-per-view event out there and having Ilia Topuria headline it. So I think for them, and also, I hate to say it because I'm a Yair fan, but that's a very winnable fight for Ilia Topuria.
Oh, yeah.
And I think they want to keep him as the champion, not manufactured, obviously. They're not going to throw tomato cans at him, as you said. They're going to give him real meaningful contenders. But somebody like a Movsar, I think, poses the biggest threat to Ilia. I still think Ilia would be favored, and rightfully so, in that fight, but that's a hard fight against a guy that, let's be honest, doesn't finish people in the UFC and is a relative unknown.
Right.
And if Movsar were to get in there and steal Topuria's thunder and become the champion, that makes 145, the excitement around 145, scale down just a notch. So if I'm the matchmakers for the UFC, I'm looking really heavily into what happens tomorrow between T-City and Yair, and I'm hoping that one of the two of them, probably Yair, is able to get through the fight unscathed, and then we can make a big match towards the end of the summer.
Yeah, and that's what the UFC is always looking for. They're looking for the best matchups, and I love that Dana White has taken away the same issue that boxing is running with. Like, if you aren't an undefeated fighter, you're a nobody. Like, you can lose in MMA and be totally fine. But I think Ilia Topuria really needs to be the champion at 145, and the UFC understands that. He's got control. I mean, look, he's an undeniable star. When you've got the guys from Real Madrid and Barcelona and these mega sports, Roger Federer, world famous tennis players, people are taking notice of Ilia Topuria. He's going to become a very big star over the next few months, and it just makes sense. Look, he's a brash guy. Want to see him win, want to see him lose, it doesn't matter. Just tune in to watch him fight. I think he can be an international star. I think he can really garner a lot of attention, and I think he can get a lot of eyes on the UFC. If he's doing collaborations with Sergio Ramos, if he's hanging out with Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, whoever it is that is piqued their interest because of Ilia Topuria becoming the world champion, I think it's a good thing. And look, I'm a major fan of guys that are brash and great on the microphone and then can back it up with great skills in the octagon. But there's also guys that I'm a big fan of that don't really play into the promotional side and the marketing side of the UFC. And that's a guy like Movsar. He's not going to go out there and talk the trash that Ilia did to Volkanovski. Yeah. He's going to come out brash. He's going to say things and he 100% means them. And it's going to sound really scary. But he's not that type of guy that's going to garner worldwide attention. And no offense to the guy, this isn't a good looking contest, but Ilia Topuria looks like $1 million, and some of those guys, they could care less about how much fashion they have when they walk into a building or something. So I think Ilia Topuria, for many reasons, also including the skills that he has inside the octagon, is a good champion for the UFC. They understand that. And like I said, there's no such thing as tune-up fights in the UFC. And I'm certainly not trying to say that Yair Rodriguez or Brian Ortega would be a tune-up fight. But stylistically, I think that would be a good first direction for him to go for his first title defense. And somebody like Movsar is going to be there. You don't have to worry about him losing a fight or stubbing his toe on the way to the title. He's certainly going to be a number one contender. And there will be a time where you go in there against guys who are seemingly unbeatable. You take take on all comers and you just go fight the best guys. It's all about legacy at some point. But right now, you've got a fresh champion. I know he carries himself like a world-class, high-level fighter, and that's exactly what he is. But at the same time, Ilia is still 26 years old. By the time he does his first title defense, he'll probably be 27 years old. So that's still very young. He's not even touched his prime yet. I'd say let him chill for a minute, maybe late summer, midsummer, or even that Mexican Independence Day in the sphere that they're talking about doing, especially if Yair gets his hand raised. Hell, even if T-City gets his hand raised, because I know he's born in America, but he's very much a Mexican fighter and has that blood in him. So I think it would be an interesting fight. I think there's a lot of potential for 145 to really get a boost and a fresh coat of paint. But right now, we got to do some waiting. We got to see some results out of these fights that are going to happen at 145, and then we'll have our answers.
And I think that's probably, you talk about building the star of Ilia Topuria and allowing him to build that allure and that legacy. And that's why I think they will wait on the Suga Sean O'Malley fight until the right time. Yeah. That fight is going to happen at some point, provided that both guys can keep the belt. One thing we know about Sean, he's very tall for the weight class. He's going to fill out eventually, and making that 135 cut is going to get hard for him at some point. And if he's still got the belt, the natural thing to do when you have a star that's been able to defend the belt a couple of times is let them go for champ status. Right. So Sean's kind of heading down that road, provided that he can get past Cheeto and potentially Merab. Certainly they'll look to make that fight at that point. I almost wish that Max hadn't taken the 300 fight against Justin Gaethje, because that would have been, I would have been like the 40% of our subscribers that voted to say that they want to see Max Holloway fight Topuria, because one, I love Max. I'm a massive fan of Blessed Holloway. Right. I think he gives Topuria a difficult stylistic matchup from a boxing and range perspective. It would be a very different fight than the Volk fight. Here's the other thing. Max Holloway's never touched the canvas in his entire life, never been knocked down, never been knocked out. So good luck trying to finish Max Holloway. So you really got to come with some real strategy to try to beat somebody like Blessed. But more importantly than that, I do think it's a winnable fight for Ilia, and what a great name to have on his resume. Two of the top three featherweights of all time, Volkanovski, Max Holloway. That would just be an incredible start to a championship run. Yeah. But I think because of the nature of when Max is fighting, it's still a couple of months away, because we all kind of see the writing on the wall. We know what's going to happen with Justin and Max. They probably won't be able to fight till the end of 2024, early 2025, after the war that they have.
That's going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah, and you simply can't have your champion sitting that long. So it really does feel to me like this weekend's fight matters a great deal, and especially if one of the two, either Ortega or Yair, gets through unscathed, that's going to be your next contender.
I agree, and I'm never going to get my way. Of course, I have to sit like everybody else, but if I were to enter into that poll, which I did, I was going Max Holloway. I think he deserves it, and I think it'd be a lot of fun because, as you know, Max Holloway claims he's the best boxer in MMA, and I believe that to be true. I don't think he has the single-shot KO power like Ilia's got, but his accumulation and his volume does do enough for him to get his hand raised and usually get people out of there. But at the same time, Ilia hasn't shown us all of the wrinkles in his MMA game since he's been in the UFC. I know he had great submissions outside of the UFC, and now he's coming in as this heavy-handed, killer. Yeah. But Max Holloway is so dynamic. He's so good. And, of course, he can stand there and outbox most people and just use his ones and twos and great striking to get people out of there. But when Max starts mixing in the martial arts, changing his stances, switching stances, kicking the legs, using some of that clinch work, and then tying people up, going for fake takedowns and all that, Max Holloway, cardio. It's insane. Yeah. Max Holloway... Nobody needs to forget how good Max Holloway still is to this day. So I hope that one happens. But, of course, we're going to have to wait and see what the results are to some of these fights. But, man, Ilia's got a tough road ahead of him. But I think all these matchups that are going to get lined up for him are going to be entertaining.
They're going to be some good ones.